Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hoffman's Hunting Heritage. I'm your host, Bill Hoffman, and this week's show is technically a rerun show, but it was a very important rerun show, and I wanted to bring it back to you guys because I'm discussing bullcrap, meaning buzzword bullcrap. We're going to talk about kinetic energy. So, on with this week's show.
Welcome to Hoffman's Hunting Heritage. Load your quiver, camo up, and join us for another great episode of Outdoors Action. Here is your host, Bill Hoffman.
And this week's episode is Buzzword Bullcrap. Buzzword Bullcrap, what does that mean? Buzzword Bullcrap is basically a segment where I am going to take something that is just absolutely blown out of proportion in the outdoors industry and kind of rant on it, okay? And this week, it's the buzzword kinetic energy, KE. That's right. The mathematical saving grace of killing animals. Not. Okay. Well, kind of. So here's what we need to understand. Where do we often hear about kinetic energy? We often hear about it in the wrong places in the outdoors industry. For example, we often hear about it in archery, but not in firearms hunting, where in firearms hunting, it actually makes sense to talk about kinetic energy, and it makes zero freaking sense to talk about it with archery. Well, maybe not zero. There is a few little reasons why, and we're going to get to those first of all. But I think first of all, it's important to explain exactly what kinetic energy is. And when I say exactly, I don't mean exactly because I'm not a physicist or a mathematician or anything like that. I'm a writer. But I do have a basic understanding on what kinetic energy is. Kinetic energy is basically shock, okay? It's impact. It's part of momentum, which is basically where it gets messed up in regards to archery and penetration. But the kinetic energy of something is the power it has when it hits you, okay? So, for example, if I throw a brick at you at 20 miles an hour and the brick hits you, it's gonna hurt, okay? Because that brick has mass and weight and velocity, and it's solid, it holds a lot of kinetic energy, right? So now let's say I throw a tennis ball at you, okay? And we can even say that the mass and the speed and all that and the velocity, well, not the mass, but the speed and the velocity and the impact are all the same, okay? It's not going to hurt as much. Why? Because it doesn't have the kinetic energy. Now, that kinetic energy can be attributed to its mass, but now let's go ahead and look at that in regards to archery, okay? Now, we hear all the time, this bow produces this much kinetic energy, or this arrow stores this much kinetic energy. Kinetic energy doesn't really come to play in archery too much. Now, you hear a lot, kinetic energy gets, I'm already sick of saying kinetic energy, can you tell? But kinetic energy gets a lot of play and a lot of buzz when it comes to arrow penetration, which, okay, remember I said there's a little bit of, to do here. Well, what's responsible for arrow penetration is actually momentum. That's the scientific force behind it. It's not kinetic energy. Kinetic energy, however, is part of the scientific formula that creates momentum. So the more kinetic energy you have, the more momentum you have. Momentum is force times mass times acceleration, and all that stuff. So there's a again, not a mathematician. I just understand, archery. So basically, the only time you need to actually worry about the science of kinetic energy when it comes to archery is by chance if you're shooting mechanical broadheads. With mechanical broadheads, just the sheer fact of when they hit the animal, they rob you of some kinetic energy. It takes kinetic energy to open them. That energy's got to be transferred from one place to another to open the blades of that broadhead. And then, the broadhead cuts in. So there is where you have a kinetic energy issue. Now, different broadheads, of course, take different, there's foot pounds and inch pounds and all that crap. I'm not even getting into it. Just know this. If you're shooting less than, in my personal opinion, 50 pounds, your draw is your bow is shooting the arrow at less than 50 pounds. You do not, in my opinion, have enough kinetic energy to use mechanical broadheads, because what's going to happen is when that arrow hits the deer, you're losing kinetic energy, which is losing momentum, inversely affecting the penetration that you're going to get upon trying to harvest that animal. Now, if you're shooting these higher poundage bows with higher speed arrows, it's not an issue. You have kinetic energy all day long to spare to get, the broadhead into the vitals. But the broadhead into the vitals. Now, here's a really good thing to think about. Now, if you're listening to this show, to this podcast, I'm pretty damn sure that you watch hunting shows and hunting videos, and you have seen a lot of archery hunts. And do you notice what I notice? No pass-throughs. That's right. Now, when we're talking about pass-throughs, it's the act of the arrow passing through the animal, so you have an entry hole and an exit hole. Now, when you go back and watch these videos from, let's say the early 90s, the late 80s into the, maybe even late 90s, up to about, 2000, what do you see? All pass-throughs. I'm not lying. Go back and watch some old Bill Jordan, Michael Waddell monster buck videos, and they are blowing through every deer. And why are they doing that? Well, if today's bows are faster, and today's bows have more kinetic energy, and today's bows are so much more efficient, how come they're not getting pass-throughs? Oh, the deer aren't bigger. Well, what's happening is, with the switch to mechanical broadheads and losing that kinetic energy at the impact, you're losing momentum. And the trade-off here is that the mechanical broadheads cut such a big hole when they work properly that that's the trade-off. You're trading off penetration, or you're trading off an exit hole for a massive entry hole. And it's important to say this too, that mechanical broadheads do blow through deer. I'm not, if you hit any deer in the shoulder, no matter what broadhead you're shooting, you're not going to get a pass through. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm saying in general, that's what we're seeing is we're not seeing the pass throughs because we're losing momentum. So people talk about kinetic energy, but they're not talking about momentum. So, and this, again, all pertains to archery only. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you are talking archery and someone starts talking about kinetic energy, whether it's a salesman or someone pitching something to you, or even the guy at your local archery club, go ahead and roll your eyes. And what you need to do is send him to an article written by Dr. Ashby. Dr. Ashby is a physicist, I don't know if he's a mathematician, but he wrote a fantastic article about penetration in arrows and kinetic energy and momentum and using heavy arrows and speed. It just basically takes everything that the marketing department behind these companies that tout their kinetic energy It takes it all and throws it away and tells you the truth behind it. Okay? So that is how kinetic energy does not matter in archery. But wait a minute. It does matter in firearms hunting. Well, after the break, we'll come back and we'll talk about how important kinetic energy is in regards to firearms. Twins of Prey, the outdoor adventure novel series by W.C. Hoffman. Orphan twin boys are raised by a woodsman they call Uncle, off the grid in the woods of northern Michigan. Trained in the art of the woodsman, they became the ultimate hunting, fishing, surviving, and killing forces that their uncle had designed them to be. When changing lives is not an option, the twins begin to take lives. Enjoy this fast-paced, thrilling, outdoors adventure novel series as the twins battle against the society that wants to end their woodland way of life. Twins of Prey, Twins of Prey 2 Homecoming, and Twins of Prey 3 Ascension are available at WCHoffman.com as well as Amazon.com. Be the snake, not the mouse. Buzzword bullcrap. Kinetic energy. That's right. Thanks for coming back after the break. And we were talking about kinetic energy and how it makes no sense to tout it or even really, worry about it in regards to archery hunting, when we should be worried about momentum, not kinetic energy. And I will eventually do an episode on arrow design and arrow breakdown and why an arrow that's traveling slower is better than a fast arrow, or a light arrow traveling fast, but that's another episode. What I want to talk about now is why kinetic energy is important in regards to firearms hunting. Well, simply said, remember at the beginning of this episode, I explained to you that kinetic energy, oh my God, I'm so sick of saying kinetic energy. I know I bitched about that earlier, but hey, I am who I am. But anyway, kinetic energy is the shock value. It's the impact. It's the damage done as soon as that projectile, be it arrow, broadhead, lead, slug, whatever you're shooting. It's the impact, the thump, the whack, okay, I'm out of adjectives, but you get the idea. It's the knockdown power that is delivered upon this nervous system as it makes connection with the animal. Obviously, bullets kill first. Okay, the first way a bullet kills is by shock to the system, is by kinetic energy, is by the brick hitting the animal, not the tennis ball. That is a bullet's first line of killing. The bullet's second line of killing is through trauma. Trauma is as that bullet enters the body cavity, maybe it hits the spine or it breaks the neck, and a lot of times the impact and the trauma combine together and snap the deer's neck. Or it's just, it overwhelms their central nervous system and they just die right there. Okay. But sometimes that bullet needs to go through, rip its way through the lungs and kill by trauma or, just basically, you know what a bullet does. It destroys the insides. Okay. Creating death. Now, an arrow doesn't do that. How does an arrow kill? An arrow kills by laceration, right? And blood loss. So there is no trauma. There's no trauma that's going from an arrow anyway that's going to kill a deer. It's all laceration. It's cut. It's slicing. It's blood loss. It's popping those lungs. Not the air either by asphyxiation from the deer not being able to breathe due to holes in the lungs, or by shooting it, or by blood loss from the hole in the lungs, or shooting the heart. Of course, there's, liver kills and paunch shots and stuff like that, but generally speaking, okay? So that is why kinetic energy in a bullet is important, because the more kinetic energy that a bullet has leaving a firearm, the better it is suited for quickly killing the game. So, again, we talked about what makes up kinetic energy. Well, it's all those things. It's the weight of the bullet versus the speed of the bullet versus all those things. So what I would want, me personally, is you say you have 65 grain bullet traveling at 2,000 feet per second. Or, well, we can fudge the numbers. I'm not a mathematician, but we'll just use this for now, right? So what do you think has more kinetic energy? The 165 grain bullet or the 150 grain bullet traveling a little bit faster? Well, we're going to go back to that brick, right? Do you want to get hit with a smaller brick coming faster, or do you want to get hit with a bigger brick going slower? Well, that smaller brick going faster potentially has more kinetic energy, right? Do you want to get hit by a school bus going 10 miles an hour? Or do you want to get hit by a pickup truck going 100 miles an hour? Well, you know what? I'm going to take the school bus going 10 miles an hour because I'm probably going to live. Why? Because that school bus doesn't have as much kinetic energy. But wait, Bill, you said that, a slower is more deadly, and slower and heavier is more deadly. In archery, it is, because I'm dying from laceration. I'm not dying from shock trauma. Shock trauma is caused by that lighter car going faster. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to you again. But, just when it comes to archery versus firearms, that's the best way to break it down, in my opinion, is probably the car analogy, the car versus bus analogy. Again, you want to get hit by a bus going 10 or a car going 100. Every time you're going to pick that bus going 10. Now, if you want to hit the deer, you're going to pick that faster bullet that's carrying more kinetic energy. But in archery, it's not as efficient. Okay, I'm rambling. I know I'm repeating myself over and over. It's just something that really, it really sticks to me. I laugh every time I see someone touting kinetic energy in the archery world. It doesn't really matter unless you're shooting mechanical broadheads out of a lightweight bow. Okay. But I really want to thank you guys for coming back. This is episode 3 of the Hoffman's Hunting Heritage Outdoors podcast. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying recording these for you guys. And by the way, I'm getting some great feedback via email. So if you guys email me, there is a good chance I will read your email in over the air on a future podcast. So again, just want to thank you for listening. And I'm going to sign off this episode like I signed them all off. Get outdoors. It's a wild place to be.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hoffman's Hunting Heritage. Get outdoors. It's a wild place to be.